Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by the award-winning Nordvpn. I've been using Nord for years now because it secures my internet traffic and keeps my data private, especially when traveling or on public Wi-Fi. Nordvpn has servers in 60 countries, does not log your data, unlocks Netflix and other geographic restrictions on entertainment content, and has a 30-day money-back guarantee. To get the best deal on a subscription, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com/NordVPN or use the promo code BTFuture. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Brad Chisum. He's the CEO at Launch Factory. Brad, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Launch Factory is actually really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in El Paso, Texas.
Okay, interesting. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
Well, for undergrad, I was electrical engineering and math.
Okay.
And I was going down that path.
What got you passionate about that at an early age?
Probably my dad. I mean, he was a technical guy. He was an engineer, and I really resonated with that. And so, I was good. It was something I was good at. So not great. I can't say that, but it was. I enjoyed those classes more, and it seemed like something that would be interesting to do. But I really, it kind of was a closet entrepreneur, so to speak. So I always had these ambitions and dreams of starting a company. Okay. But never really told a lot of people about that.
Interesting. Okay, so you get out of school. Walk us through your journey. You actually end up getting an MBA, but walk us through your career up until what you're doing at Launch Factory.
Yeah, so I started off working for ST Microelectronics. Okay. They brought me to San Diego. And that was a pretty cool job. But then, like a lot of semiconductor sites at that time, it got shut down. And so I had the choice. I could relocate to their Phoenix location, or I could take a job at SPAWAR, which is a Navy research lab that happened to have its own semiconductor manufacturing research facility. The thing that made my decision, I was dating this person at the time that is now my wife, and I really needed to see where that relationship would go. Gotcha. So I said goodbye to industry and hello to government R&D. That is, those two worlds could not be more different, right? You're going from, I was working, 12 to 13-hour days and it's high pressure, go all the time, to, government research where you get to do lots of really cool things. You couldn't tell anybody about it because it was everything they did there was secret. But there was just not a lot of pressure in terms of how many hours you work. You just sort of, you worked as hard as your motivations took you. And so it was a really big change. And it was there that I started working on one of the technologies we were working on. We got to know the inventor of it fairly well. And he and I decided that this might be something worth trying to license and commercialize. So that's where the MBA came in. So I had been, I mentioned I was a closet entrepreneur, right? So I was really started thinking about, I'd like to start my own business some point, but I knew nothing about business. And so I thought, well, I can go start taking some classes and learn about business. And so the MBA was really, really useful for me. And the faculty and staff were great. So when Richard Waters was the inventor of this technology that we licensed, but what we were able to do, every single class that had a project, they let me use this technology as the subject matter for wherever the project might be. So business plan writing class, those marketing, even a finance class I did for financial forecasting exercises. We used this business, and
that's actually really smart.
Oh, it was amazing. It wasn't when I signed up to get the MBA. That wasn't my objective, but after I got in and started talking to some of the professors, they were very supportive of this. So, and I ended my MBA program by going through business plan competitions, and that was really how the company was born. We went through business plan competitions all across the country. And it worked out well because, I had to license the technology. I had to quit my job at the Navy. And so I went from my nice steady paycheck all the way down to zero. And I think of any of us that have either contemplated or done that know how much of a life change that can be. Paychecks are just really addictive. And it's when you have to give up that paycheck habit, it's a rough ride. So I had saved up for about a year's worth of living expenses.
Okay.
And had to go 3 years without a salary. So these business plan competitions, you win them, they pay money. And I ended up making about $75,000 from just business plan competition winnings that I used to kind of help bridge that gap for the next 2 years.
Wow.
So it worked out really, really well. But more important than the money we got was the exposure and the network contacts we made through the process.
Fair.
So
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest examples I met this guy. We did Rice business plan competition. We didn't even do very well there, but I met one of the judges. His name was Dan Piat. He gave me CEO level introduction to anybody in our target market space that I wanted to talk to. He just happened to have these contacts, and he volunteered to make them available to me purely out of kindness. There's no compensation for him. He couldn't take compensation due to conflicts of interest with some of his board positions he was on. So so here we had a target market that we had no access to, and I go to a competition and I meet somebody that's going to effectively open the door and roll out the red carpet. We ended up with a strategic partner as a result of that, we got funded on the order of $17 million over several years. But I mean, it's just, it was an amazing way to get going, to get in contact with somebody like that could really just make the difference at the snap of his fingers.
Very cool. So walk me through the journey of the rest of that company, because is that the one you guys sold to Google?
Yes, that's right. So that was it was an amazing experience. It was a real roller coaster ride because, and I think almost any of your startup stories often are. I mean, there's times where we almost went out of business, and there's times where, so it would get pretty desperate at times. But we ended up with this one partner is actually in the oil and gas space. We were building a sensor that they would use, or we're interested in using anyway. Well, that company went through all kinds of its own turbulent times. They ended up splitting into two different entities. We ended up going over to the spin-out company where the person that was put in charge of our project was one of the co-inventors of the sensor technology that we were being tasked with replacing.
Oh, interesting.
So there, yeah. So he wasn't exactly happy to see us, and so that's so things got fairly difficult at that time. That project ended up winding down. Then oil and gas kind of ran out of money there for a little while. So we ended up having to do a major pivot over to consumer applications, and that's where it ultimately led us to get acquired by Google. But with what we did was we set up a strategic partnership process. What that means is we had networked our way to about 10 to 12 different large consumer companies, networked to the decision maker level. And what we did was we told everybody, okay, we're looking for a strategic partner. And in some cases, we knew that really meant were looking to get acquired. But in other cases, it really meant strategic partner. And so what we did was we said we can only work with one because we're a small entity. We need to position this technology for consumer applications, and we need a partner to help us do that. Provide the funding, and some other support for that. So we're going along this process, and we started this in June. At this point, we never talked to anybody from Google, didn't have any network contacts. Well, it turns out I get a call from a guy named Bob Peebler, who was the former CEO of our strategic partner sponsor in the oil and gas space. He had retired, and he had met somebody from Google, talked to them about us, and set up a meeting. Right. So then we meet Google the first time in July, and they end up giving us a term sheet in August.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, this went fast.
They must have been looking for like your technology, or like maybe not necessarily from you guys, but like that technology you guys were building.
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I mean, it was, okay. But I can tell you what I speculate. So this is, may or may not actually be the case, but because we were getting a lot of attention from some pretty significant players. And you go to the Bay Area, it's a small world, right? So bottom line is, Google knew we had something interesting, and I think they saw a race they could win. When you look at how Google's M&A team operates, when they want something, they can move so incredibly fast, and everybody else just couldn't move as fast as they did, and Google won as a result. So I think it was more of an opportunistic play that Google did in our case. But it is true that they do have a number of things they're always looking for, and there's an underlying strategy and all of that. But they're pretty good at keeping some of that under wraps. So even after you work there, you don't always get to know the details. So, but yeah, so they ended up swooping in and acquiring us. And it's just sort of, interesting when you look at it, because we got our start out of the business plan competitions where we meet Dan. Well, because of Dan, we meet Bob. And because of Bob, we met Google. And if you just look at that little chain there, the likelihood of that occurring is really, really small. And none of it was anything that we did intentionally, meaning that we didn't meet Dan on purpose. I didn't identify him and go seek him out. We did seek this relationship with a strategic partner, but a retired CEO looking out for your best interest when he has no personal stake in the game is not something you would normally expect. But
you obviously left a really good impression on him if he was basically pitching your company to other companies, especially when he has no skin in the game, right? Like, obviously you impressed him and your company and what you guys were doing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think that's really good advice. Like, you never know where some of this stuff or these connections or something that's going to help you along the way is going to come, right?
That's right. Yeah, you never know. And there's times where relationships can get turbulent, and in fact they did at one point between Bob and I, where there were some misunderstandings, and he had actually gone and talked to my board of directors about. He actually went so far as to suggest that maybe Richard and I, I was the CEO, he was the CTO, maybe we needed to be replaced.
Wow.
And so that wasn't the high point, right? That would be the low point of that particular relationship. But the thing is, you look at those situations and you have to, take it in context. So if I certainly felt emotional about it, but if I had allowed those emotions to dictate my actions, then I would have spoiled that relationship, and I never would have known what would have come from it or what I would have missed out on. So it would have been hard to look at that in hindsight and realize the mistake. But the reality was, he had misinformation. And so because I didn't, allow this to get to me emotionally, we were able to, long story short, we were able to get to the place where his information is corrected. But we had to, that involved getting this third party involved as a consultant. And it was, this is one of those things that I have two little girls. And I remember one time, one of them asked me if bad guys were real, and that's what I had to tell her. I was like, yeah, they absolutely are real, because there was a person inside this company that he falsified information, and about us, and because he basically didn't like our project. It wasn't even personal against me or anybody else in our company, as far as I know, but he didn't like the fact that we were there.
Wow.
Some of that's understandable from the fact that, we got all this funding at the same time that company was having layoffs. So, so nobody likes seeing their friends laid off, and then these, crazy R&D projects going to some unknown startup company. Right. So,
Yeah,
but to actually take that and falsify information, that's where, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But that's what actually happened. And we almost got, like I said, I had my board of directors contacted to try to remove me from,
Wow.
being leadership of my own company. But then because we were able to mend that relationship and make everything okay, when Bob had an opportunity to look out for us and spread and help us out, he took it. And, so,
Interesting.
but I think any high quality relationship, if it probably got tested at some point along the way, right? Like if you think of whether it's a marriage or a business relationship, if you haven't had to go through some difficult patch, then there's something about going through that challenge that strengthens the relationship, assuming you make it through to the other side.
Sure.
And I think that's what happened with us.
Sure. So you get acquired by Google. You stay on at Google for almost 2 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was part of the deal.
Okay.
And that's normal for Google and others as well. But they wanted to see things, properly transferred over. Most of the team that was part of the original group is still there.
Wow.
But when you are a startup person and you then go work for a large corporate entity, even one as nice as Google, it just wasn't for me. And
Sure.
Again, this is not a negative statement on Google. They were probably better than the vast majority of big companies out there. It's more of a statement on me that this idea of working in the big company environment, I couldn't imagine anything I wanted to do less.
Sure. No, fair enough.
So yeah.
So
So when I got the opportunity to move on, I made sure I met my obligations there, and
Right.
then, said a very thankful but positive farewell.
Sure. So walk me through, did you take some time off, or how did you take that journey up until deciding to launch Factory?
Yeah. So I did take some time off. I had gone, full steam for a long time. And at this point, my daughters were 4 and 6 years old, and I needed to, I needed to be around a little bit more. And my wife had been really, really good at making sure to shift their schedule around. So I still got plenty of father-daughter time, but I didn't need to do that anymore. And so took some time there, and that was wonderful. But at some point, taking time off becomes, it depends on your personality, right? Like I'm not a retiring kind of a person. And so it wasn't very long before, plain retired guy was starting to become torture. And so I needed to, and I'd always been thinking about what was my next startup going to be. And while I was taking time off, I was getting highly involved in the local startup scene, and I was, working with and doing some angel investing into local startup companies. And that was great, but it's all very much part-time.
Right.
But I was waiting for the light bulb to turn on for my next big business idea. And of course, the first business idea wasn't mine. That was Richard's. He was the inventor. I just really thought it was a good idea. So the light bulb didn't turn on. But in the course of waiting for it, I started thinking, well, I can start doing some research on how to improve my odds of success. Because when you go through the startup experience, and I think this is true for the vast majority, if not all startups, if you really look at it, you realize that a lot of your success was due to causes outside of you.
Yeah.
There may be some luck involved, and there's times where maybe you could, if things had gone the way you intended, it would have screwed everything up. And those are very humbling things to try to digest.
Sure.
Right. So I wanted to say, okay, well, if I had the strong desire to go do this again, but I want to do it better. I want to increase my odds of success. And what can I do to do that? And well, you start looking at things and you realize that, a lot of things you can do to improve your odds are somewhat universal in what I mean by that is they apply to multiple, lots of different businesses. There's a lot of studies that'll say that the number one cause of startup failure is that there's no market need. And so that means that if those founders had done their due diligence properly before they went and invested their own time and money, before they went and took in outside investor dollars, they could have found that out.
Right.
Now, that's an oversimplification perhaps, but the point being that if you really take a diligent path at looking before you leap and really trying to understand what you're doing, if you really look at the business side of a technology business and try to make sure you're executing on that as well as you can improve your odds of success. And so it was in looking at all of these types of things that Launch Factory emerged. When we really, and this is where I got my co-founder of Launch Factory to join me. His name is James Herford. He was also he was chief of staff of the technology engineering group there, and now he and I are doing Launch Factory. But when you really kind of look at where you need to start if you want to get the business side right for a startup company,
right,
it happens at the idea stage. You have to start all the way at the very, very beginning. And for that reason, Launch Factory, we don't take outside applications to come join us in terms of people with ideas, or we're not a traditional incubator in that sense. We start with the ideas, we down select to ones that we think are really, really good, and then we move forward with some incredibly thorough due diligence. Hundreds of hours go into our due diligence before we actually say these are what we're going to do. And then once we have those ideas ready, then we look for the best founders we can have to lead those companies. And then those founders go through our incubation process. We're small volume, so we did one company in 2019. We're doing two companies this year. And so, it's small volume, and we keep it small for a number of reasons. But one of them is we view our incubation process as high touch, meaning that we really, really get involved. The founders are in charge. They get to lead. They have full authority and everything else, but we really try to make sure that they're fully supported so they can do the best. So they can do the best they can, stack the cards in their favor, so to speak. So we keep it small volume, but it also allows us to fund at a decent level. We put $300,000 into each company.
Oh wow!
Okay.
So
after
a
we put in
significant amount of money.
Yeah, especially considering that this is starting from literally day one of the company. We put in the money after the founders have been selected, but before they've actually shown up to work, right? And so the founders get 2/3 of the equity. Launch Factory retains 1/3.
Got you.
But then we use the proceeds. We take our third and we actually use that to go back and benefit the company. So the way we do that is we have advisors and other network contacts and things that we do on our side, and we use our equity stake in these companies as currency for which we can compensate these advisors.
Sure.
So the kind of advisors we get, they're not looking for a paycheck, not a traditional paycheck anyway. They're looking to participate in a larger upside.
Right. Of course.
And this allows us to provide that. And so, but this way, the companies themselves, they get to benefit from a much larger team of advisors and network contacts than they could have on their own, or Launch Factory could provide just with its in-house staff. So it really is something that brings a lot of value. And we were able to do this in a way where it's all focused on the company And because these are compensated advisor roles, we get greater level, we get more of their time. And so what our advisors come in and give very specific feedback and instruction and advice to our founders on how to proceed and whatever their plans are. So, so it's something we're pretty excited about. I think if anyone who's had a startup experience, they look back, they'll be able to point to a lot of people that have helped them out. And what we're trying to do is create a situation where those people that can help out a given set of founders are there from day one.
No, I love that. I think that's actually, it's obviously like people, I think at this point kind of understand the traditional kind of way. There's a handful of names from incubators to kind of launch whatever, like everybody's heard of that. But I think what you guys are doing, you have a unique approach to this whole space, right? And you're right. I think having those connections and kind of advisors from day one really, really help you or give you the best chance of success, right? And so, no, I think that's very cool of you guys. Today's show is brought to you by Freshbooks, an all-in-one small business invoicing and accounting solution. I've been using Freshbooks for over a decade to send estimates for time and expense tracking, sending invoices, and collecting payments online. Then at tax time, I just generate a report that can be sent off to an accountant. To get a free trial of FreshBooks, please go to buildingthefutureshow.com/FreshBooks. But I want to dive deeper into actually getting a founder recruited. Like, if I wanted to be a founder, how do I actually, try to get you guys at Launch Factory to let me be a founder? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is, ultimately, what we always talk about around Launch Factory. The founders themselves are more important than anything else that we do, right? If you give great help to the wrong person, it's not going to go anywhere. But you give great help to the right person, and they'll go a lot further. And it also, if we get the right founders and Launch Factory screws things up, meaning we don't get the right advisors or something like that, the company's still going to be fine.
Right.
So the right founders, they compensate for any lack of execution on our side, but then any positive contribution they have, they're able to multiply it. And so it's really, really important for us to get the right founders. And so the vast majority of our time and energy is actually spent on helping on that process. And so the way we do it, you look around, you think of like what works in terms of identifying talent and what doesn't work. Well, what doesn't work is a traditional job interview. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
And you can do more involved job interviews where, there's structured interviews or whatever, and that makes things better. But if you go look at the statistics, it's still not good enough for what we want to do. We need to have all of our founders to be the right founders. And so what's interesting is you look at what has high success rates, and there's two examples we found. One is when people hire somebody that they have prior work experience with, so they really know that person. And I think we all know that, right?
Yeah,
and then two, you go look at areas where they're very talent focused, and so immediately athletics comes up, where if you're going to go be a professional football player, you have to your resume and what you've done matters, but you don't get to make the team till you've gone through tryouts. And same thing if you are in something like the symphony, right? You can, no matter what you've done before, you don't get to go join another symphony without a tryout. And this also reflects how Launch Factory views things. Your resume and what you've done in the past, that's nice and it's really good. And but it doesn't necessarily tell us what you're going to do. It tells us what you have done.
Sure.
And we need to know what you're going to do. And specifically, what are you going to do with one of our businesses? And so that's where, and James is he's the architect of this, but he's done a really good job of setting up a means by which we can ask candidate founders to show us what they would do with our particular business opportunity. Now, our business ideas are high level enough. There's still a lot of room to shape them. So So this is not a situation where there's a set of rules or a strict guideline they need to adhere to. This is more, hey, we want to build a business in this area. Here's our due diligence. Here's the basic concept. Now show us how to implement this in the best way that you can.
So how do you come up with those business ideas though?
So there's a number of ways we source ideas. We have internally sourced ideas, which the two that we have out now are internally sourced. So that means that one of the team members here at Launch Factory was the originator of that idea. But then, of course, like a lot of things, it was shaped by the rest of the team before it got to be what's currently posted on our webpage. Gotcha. But we really allow the due diligence that we do, the information that we see to help shape the idea. This goes all the way to doing, a lot of primary research where we go talk to, the customer, the target customers and get feedback from them and help them shape what the offering should be. And so all of this gets packaged up. You won't see the due diligence package on our webpage, but once founders come into our process, they will be given that information. And so they can take that and they can, interpret that in the way that, makes the most sense in terms of shaping how they'd implement the business. But what we basically ask people to do is over an 8-week time period, they will demonstrate how they would implement our business concept.
Okay. And do they have to be in San Diego or can they do it remote?
This can be done all remote. Now, okay. If they get selected as a founder, the company will be in San Diego for the incubation process. So they will need to relocate to San Diego if they're selected. But no, they don't need to be in San Diego to be a candidate. And so at each phase, there's a down select to move towards the top group, and it all culminates with basically a pitch competition where everybody's pitching their variation of the same business concept. And when we've done this before, what you end up with at the end, there's some, you will have a spectrum. I mean, it may all be the same business from a high level idea, but the implementations, you'll see some significant differences. And that's a good thing, right? Founders, totally. We want real founders, and founders have to have the freedom and the latitude to shape the company in the way they think makes the most sense and the way that plays to their strengths. And so we were very pleased with the way the process went last year, and we're really excited to see what we get to see out of candidates this year.
Interesting. So do your founders need to be technical or non-technical, or does it not really matter? It really depends on like the founders themselves.
We don't put a strict requirement on it.
Okay.
So we don't, but that said, you go look at a given business idea and, like we have, like one of the ones we have up right now, Productize, it has it is one that would require a significant, computer science execution component, right? So if you don't have that particular skill set in your background, and what we do, by the way, is each company has 2 founders. So if there's a skill set that's absolutely required for implementing that business, and neither of the 2 founders have that, they will have to be able to articulate how they're going to compensate for that, right? So, like if I don't have a computer science background, so if I told you I was going to build this amazing, highly interactive web page, and then I told you I was going to do that, I would have to have an explanation as to how I'm going to do that since I can't do the coding.
Right.
So then it better, maybe I can tell you exactly who I'm going to hire, or maybe I can tell you a firm that I'm going to use because I'm going to outsource it. Those kinds of things can be okay, but you have to be able to be very convincing that you can solve the problem. And if it's because you have the skill set yourself, that's great. And if you don't, you tell us how you're going to get it, and that works too. So that's why we don't require a specific background.
Okay.
But I will say that for at least some of these businesses, having at least one team member with a particular technical skill set will make their story better.
Got you. Okay. No, that makes sense. So how do you go about actually finding and recruiting these founders?
Yeah. So what we have a number of means through which we try to get the word out. And that's really, so it's really ends up being a marketing thing in our case of just trying to make sure that that our target audience wants to know. Within San Diego, it's a little easier because we have local presence, so we can attend, in different events and do public speaking type things, and so it's easier to get the word out locally. Outside of San Diego, we are heavily reliant on LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets to just try to get the word out, and that's something that we intend to do a better job with going forward, because I really think that that there's a lot of talent across the country.
Sure.
And we really want to make sure that we give access to it. So it's really, we do have one thing that we do that's a little bit unique, and we'll see. It's very much an experiment mode, but we have what we call Launch Factory Scouts.
Okay.
So if you register to be a scout, what that means is, you yourself are not necessarily interested in being a founder, but maybe somebody that is, or maybe you are going to help spread the word. So if you spread the word as a scout and you end up leading us to find one of our founders, then you'll get 50,000 shares in the new company, and everybody that's in that scout chain will. So for instance, I'm talking to you about the process. Maybe you go tell one of your friends and they refer the founder that we actually select. Well, then both of you would get 50,000 shares in the new company.
Gotcha.
And that chain taps at 5. I don't think, the odds of any chain getting that long are pretty tiny, because by that point you've connected to almost everybody in the globe.
Sure.
But still, it's, so if you look at it, if you look at how much we'd be potentially allocating out the company, it's on par with what you would give a couple of a couple of good strategic advisors in terms of an equity stake. Well, the way we look at it, since founders are the most important thing for us to get right, if you gave us advice on who we should select and you turned out to be right, then that's equity well spent. And it is, and so this is a means by which others can participate in the upside of these companies if they help us, if they are instrumental in helping us and helping us get the right founders that ultimately lead to the success. So it'll be, so in this case, people are incentivized to spread the word, and they're incentivized to send us people to be good candidate founders.
No, that's very cool. So you mentioned you're launching 2 new companies this year, and you quickly mentioned one, but do you want to talk about both companies just to give people a decent idea of what they're potentially applying to be a founder of?
Yeah, absolutely. And on our webpage, there's a little teaser slide decks for more information. We're very excited about both of these opportunities. When you look at, I think our original list, we're on the order of, 50, 60 different business ideas that got narrowed down to these 2. So they had a lot of competition, but one of them is called Simply Independent.
Okay.
And what the problem it's Simply Independent is looking to address is when people are at the age where they are they need to move into an assisted living facility. There's quite a few people in that population that they don't actually have to, meaning that there is technology available, there are services available that would enable them to stay at home longer, but they don't have access to it either because they don't know about it, or there's an aspect of its implementation that is a little bit challenging. So what Simply Independent does is it serves as a platform to tie all of these things together to allow people that are at the age of needing to consider assisted living to stay at home longer. And you go look at that population, the vast majority of them want to stay in their homes. They don't want to move to these assisted living facilities. And so if you can enable them to stay at home longer, then you're really helping them out, and you're really doing a service. And in many cases, what ends up being is it's a service not just for the people that are enabled to stay at home, but for their families as well, right? Because it's often their family members that are having to do a lot of these things, and that ends up becoming a big challenge and a burden on them. And the parents don't like being the burden. The kids are, so and the kids are usually at that point, they have their own children and they have all their own lives and everything else. So it ends up being an area that is a challenge for a lot of people, and that challenge is only increasing over time as we get more people in that age demographic that need to move into or consider moving into an assisted living facility. So that's simply independent. Of course, the way you actually build this platform and roll this platform out, there's a lot of different ways to do it. The areas that you focus on, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And so those decisions will be made by the founders themselves. But the timing of this is really interesting because you look at historically, the demographic that's in assisted living facilities was not very tech savvy.
Right.
You look at how things are today, and 75% of seniors in the assisted living facility, that age range, are proficient with smartphones. Sure. And so we're just now at a time where a platform-based solution really starts to make sense. You can reach the majority of the market, whereas previously using a platform-based solution where previously you could not. Yeah. So we're really excited about that one. The market is incredibly huge, right? And it's growing. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity, and we have some, more definitive numbers on that in the data set that's on our webpage. So that's one of the businesses. The other business, the one I mentioned briefly earlier, is called Productize. And so this is one that, you go ask somebody, almost anybody, have you ever had an idea for an invention or a product that you think would do well in the marketplace? And I have yet to find someone that says no to that question.
Yeah, totally.
Almost all of us at some point have had some light bulb moment. Most of us don't move forward on it. There's quite a few people that do, but most of us don't. And what we would like to see is, what we did is we did a lot of surveys and studies as to why people don't move forward on these ideas. And it really boils down to two fundamental problems. One, they don't really know how. Yeah. And maybe it's not, they may know how to build a prototype, but they don't know how to get into the market and sell it. Or maybe they do know how to get in the market and sell it, but they don't know how to build it to begin with. So, but there are plenty of people out in the world that do know each step along the way, whether it's an individual or a company. And so what Productize does is it connects the inventor or the product developer, the person with the idea, with a network of people that can help them get that product to market. And so this can be anything from how do you do 3D printing prototype just to demonstrate whether or not this thing works, to how do you scale it to volume, to how do you place it and on the market and get it to work. And so it's really this networking thing where people with product ideas, regardless of experience level, can go on this platform and get their products developed and move it to market. And so they get to be their own product manager. Interesting. And they get to take it through the number of levels, and then we intend to, bring in some crowdfunding to help support the economic side, because if you're going to use these service providers, what it'll be is a bidding platform where they can bid if you need to get a prototype, for example, you upload what prototype you need to have made. They will supply, bids on how much it would cost for them to build that prototype. And then you can, you either fund it yourself as the customer, or you can employ crowdfunding to help you get there. It is amazing how much money is spent in this country just by at-home inventors. Totally. I think there's on the order of 20 million that have actually built a prototype, or have ambitions to build a prototype. And the total spend is on the order of $80 billion a year. Oh, wow. It's this, and it's fun, right? I mean, it's this thing that a lot of us have these really cool ideas, and it'd be really neat to see some, higher percentage of these things make it into the marketplace.
No, I 100% agree with you. So if people actually want to get all the details and dive a bit deeper into these opportunities and actually register, where can they go and get all these details and look at the two companies you guys are looking to start?
So the best place to go is our webpage, launchfactory.com. And we have information on the companies. There's a lot of detail on what our registration process looks like. Registration to be a founder of either one of those two companies closes on February 21st. Because we do look for two founders. If you don't have somebody, you can either apply as a pair or you can apply as an individual. But if you register as an individual, all the people that register as an individual that that would like to can look at the other pool, and there's a matching and all that kind of thing. So that matching is anytime. So there's a little bit of an advantage for registering sooner rather than later to participate with more matching opportunities. But February 21st is when registration closes, and we anticipate these companies actually starting in early summer. So and then there's ways to contact us if there's any additional information or questions anybody might have.
Very cool. And you mentioned earlier in the interview and kind of before we got started about kind of a message that you always try to give to students that I think is worth kind of repeating, because I think it's actually really good advice. And I think a lot of people maybe don't realize it or maybe think about it. Do you want to maybe mention that as we kind of close the show?
Sure. Yeah. And this was something I learned when I was getting my MBA. I signed up for an entrepreneurship class, and at the time I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I really was, conflicted about it because, I didn't know anything about business, and I wasn't sure an MBA was going to get me there. So I didn't really feel like I had what it took. Right. And so the professor of the class was Giles Bateman. He was a third co-founder of Price Club, which is now Costco. And he did a really good job of articulating what the entrepreneur experience was like. So the semester starts, there's 17 of us in class. He does a survey and asks how many want to be an entrepreneur. Two people said no, the rest said yes, and I said maybe. Right. But by the end of the semester, the last day, he did the survey again, and about half the yeses had turned to no's. The no's stayed no's, and my maybe went to a yes. And while I never actually asked anybody, any of the yeses that went to no's, it's always been my opinion that the same reason they went from yes to no was why I went from maybe to yes.
Okay.
And it's just that he taught us two really important lessons. One, he phrased it a little nicer than this, but what he basically said is, you do not have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You do not have what it takes to willpower a company into success.
Okay. And
so this is intuitively true, right? You don't get to control market conditions. You don't get to control what your competition does. There's just a lot of variables that you can't really control. So for a lot of people, this was, pretty disappointing. They were hoping to get an MBA and be able to move odds of success highly in their favor, and that's just not reality, right? So, but there was another piece to his message that was much more positive, but it's a little bit of a leap of faith, and it was that there will be people. He was very clear about this. There will be people, no matter what business concept you pursue, there will be people that will come and help you out on your journey. And so so you have to believe that. If you believe the first part, which is you cannot willpower a company into success, and you go look at the statistics of how many companies succeed and fail out there. If you don't believe that people are going to help you out, then you shouldn't go start a business. And so you need to, and you need to be open to those people that help you out, and you need to be willing to take the help when it arrives. And you need to be somebody that attributes things correctly. And so in my case, I mentioned Dan Piat offering to give me CEO level introduction to anybody I wanted to in the space, and I mentioned Bob Peebler providing an introduction to Google that ultimately got us acquired. Those are not the only two people. I could probably talk for several hours on all the people that came in and made a really big difference, some big, some small, in our journey. And so my personal experience was very validating on what Mr. Bateman taught in his entrepreneurship class. And I just think that's just the reality of how the world works. And so I think the more of us that embrace that mindset, that's the mindset we have here at Launch Factory. At Launch Factory, we want to be the first ones that are there helping out our founders. But we know there's going to be a lot more people and entities that need to come along and help out our companies before those companies could ever be successful.
No, I think that's actually really good advice from yourself and kind of your teacher, and obviously founded one of the most probably successful companies. As far as I know, they're only in North America, but everybody I think at this point has kind of heard of Costco, right? So yeah, but we're kind of out of time. So how about we close again with mentioning where people can get more information about Launch Factory and any other links you want to mention?
Webpage is the best place. I mean, you could find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Brad Chisum in San Diego. You're welcome to find me there. But our webpage is really the best place, launchfactory.com.
Perfect, Brad. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
You too. Good talking with you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.